And for those of you who don't know, the Resilience Hub embodies all of the work and the initiatives of the Race to Resilience. And the Race to Resilience is the sibling initiative to Race to Zero under the high-level climate champions. And so for the first time, resilience and climate action are being measured in human life. This is not about offsets of metric tons of carbon. This is about people's lives. I'm Kathy Boffman-McLeod. I'm the director of the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. We are thrilled to be here today. We are here to talk about extreme heat and addressing it, and extreme leadership for extreme heat. When we think about action, we think about these mayors. And these mayors, including Juan Espadas, from whom we'll hear in just a moment, Mayor Aki-Sawyerr from Freetown, Sierra Leone, Mayor Bakoyannis from Athens, Greece, and Mayor Daniella Levine Cava from Miami-Dade County. These mayors are at the vanguard of climate adaptation and resilience leadership, and they are especially leaning in to extreme heat to solve this invisible, pernicious, and deadly problem. Extreme heat is killing more people on this planet than any other climate-driven hazard, and it's a secret. And it will be a secret no more. And when you look at these mayors, this is what climate action looks like. And climate action means solutions. And two examples of those solutions are in the audience right now. Leone, the first chief heat officer in Europe, and Eugenia Cargbo, who is the chief heat officer of Freetown. Thank you. And Jane Gilbert from Miami-Dade County is not able to be here in person, but she was the first chief heat officer. And these individuals, these leaders, wake up every single day thinking about and acting on protecting people and their livelihoods from extreme heat. And the solutions, the evidence-based solutions, are plentiful. And these mayors, today's conversation, exciting, stimulating, action-oriented, and intended to attract others. We want this to be just the beginning of heat leadership. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very pleased to turn the microphone over to my colleague and the former mayor of Quito, Ecuador, Mauricio Rodas. He's that and so much more. He's leading our efforts in the City Champions for Heat Action and our global alliance, the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, a member initiative of the Race to Resilience. And this space today, we're proud to have co-created and co-built, and for the first time, set a human metric for climate measurement. And that means that the Race to Resilience will reach 4 billion people with climate resilient solutions by 2030. Thank you for joining us today, and over to Mauricio Rodas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for that introduction. It is a great pleasure to be speaking to you today. Today is about talking on solutions, on how to address the silent killer, extreme heat, which, as Kathy mentioned, is killing more people than any other climate-related hazard. And of course, we need mayors to do that. So we're particularly thrilled to have this amazing group of mayors joining us today as city champions for heat action to undertake key and bold measures to tackle extreme heat in their cities. We'll first hear from Mayor Juan Espadas from the city of Seville in Spain, who just recently announced that his city will be undertaking a collaboration with the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center to develop a heatwave naming and categorization system in order to raise awareness on Seville's population about heat-related risks and for them to be better prepared to protect themselves from this threat. So please, let's hear from Mayor Espadas.
Buenas tardes, soy Juan Espadas, alcalde de Sevilla. Quería enviaros un mensaje de ánimo y de esfuerzo en el trabajo que estáis desarrollando en la COP26 en Glasgow, en el conjunto de ese diálogo entre las ciudades y la Fundación Arsht-Rock para conseguir seguir avanzando, comprometernos en la lucha contra el cambio climático y también, evidentemente, en la adaptación a los efectos del mismo. Quiero destacar que Sevilla ha dado un paso al frente para avanzar en materia de ciencia, investigación y también en la concienciación a nuestra población sobre una cuestión como las olas de calor extremo, de las que en el sur de Europa conocemos bien sus efectos y también en mi ciudad, en Sevilla. Creemos imprescindible trabajar, y así lo vamos a hacer con la Fundación Arsht-Rock para constituir una referencia en el ámbito mundial respecto a cómo nombrar, cómo catalogar estas olas de calor extremo y cómo informar y concienciar a la población sobre los efectos en la salud y cómo efectivamente prevenir los daños más graves. Para ello, en el trabajo con la Fundación Rockefeller, vamos a trabajar también con instituciones españolas, con universidades, con centros de investigación y vamos a hacer también un trabajo de concienciación con la ciudadanía. Espero que aporte, como ciudad de Sevilla también, elementos y argumentos suficientes para que otras ciudades del mundo avancen en la misma línea y consigamos entre todas tener una nueva metodología de trabajo para nominar y para catalogar justo esas olas de calor y, por tanto, para dar mensajes e información clara a la población y poder seguir preparándonos, sobre todo para ese inevitable cambio climático que tendremos en los próximos años y para poder adaptarnos mejor también y tomar las decisiones correctas. Un saludo muy fuerte y, Mauricio, en especial a ti también, como gran conductor e impulsor de este programa.
Thank you so much, Mayor Espadas, for that message and for your engagement with this initiative. And this is what the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance and the City Champions for Heat Action initiative is all about having mayors that are taking innovative and disruptive initiatives to tackle extreme heat, to protect their populations, and particularly the most vulnerable. So that's what I would like to talk about today with our fantastic group of mayors joining us today, because 3.5 billion people will be affected by extreme heat by the year 2070. 1.6 billion of them will be living in urban areas. That is why it is so important to understand the risks that cities, urban areas around the world are facing regarding extreme heat. Now, the city of Freetown, and I am really pleased to have my dear friend Mayor Aki-Sawyerr with me today. Freetown is not a stranger to heat. And thanks to your leadership, you became a founding city champion for heat action. Recently, you appointed the first African chief heat officer and announced the setting up of a heat health task force. But there are still pending tasks. For example, you have highlighted the need to develop relevant climate risks and health-related data. So my question is, how does a city in Africa face the threats of extreme heat, and what are the main challenges you have to address, and what are some of your future strategies to tackle them?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here as Freetown. Your question was a mouthful, but we'll take it in bite-sized chunks. How does extreme heat manifest in Freetown? So Freetown is a city of 1.5 million people. It's actually already bursting at its seams because of rural-urban migration, which in the last 5 to 10 years has itself been heightened by climate. So the failure of crops for rural farmers translates into people packing up and coming to the city, which brings more pressure to us. And with that pressure comes, in combination with a lack of development control. These are mayors in this room. And I want to tell my colleague mayors that they probably wouldn't believe it if I said to them that the power, the mandate to issue building permits and to do land use planning are not with me as the mayor. They sit with the central government, with the Ministry of Lands, in contradiction to the law. The law actually gives me the power, but the reality is that the power is held by the central government, which means there's no development control, because there's no way one ministry can be effective in developing land use plans and issuing building permits for an entire country, let alone a city. So the combination of this move of people because of climate into the city with a lack of development control is a perfect recipe for the establishment, the mushrooming of many, many informal settlements as people are desperate to find somewhere to live. Extreme heat in that setting becomes a major killer because many of these homes, many of these informal communities rely on corrugated iron, zinc sheeting as the mode of housing construction. So think for a minute what it must feel like to live in a small box made of corrugated iron when the temperatures are 34, 35 degrees. And as we see the increase in temperatures, which we're all experiencing in different parts of the world, including British Columbia, we know that really would be uncomfortable, to say the least. But it doesn't stop there. The extreme heat combined with deforestation means a loss of water catchment areas and water sources, leading to water shortages. Beyond that, we also see with the extreme heat and poor sanitation, which we are working very hard to change, in about 2 or 3 years' time, we won't be talking about poor sanitation, but unfortunately for now, the sanitary landfill, which we're seeking to build, has not yet been built, so there is still open dumping. We try and control it, but it's still there, which means we've also got poor air quality. Combine that with low occupancy, heavy emitting vehicles. So sort of intuitively, you would think that the best way to deal with climate when it comes to vehicles is, well, forget electric cars. We're not talking electric cars. We're just talking about not using diesel fuel and probably using unleaded. But that means you're going to have newer vehicles. But the taxes on newer vehicles are really high. So people bring in the old vehicles, which pollute the air, and combine with the poor air quality and extreme heat is really a driver of respiratory diseases. So that's what it looks like. That's the bad news. Let's come on to what we're doing, which is the good news. So there are no shortcuts and there are no easy answers. But in response to some of what I've set out, and in our desire to work on extreme heat, in addition to having Eugenia join us as our first Chief Heat Officer to focus on building the data, we're taking a few practical steps. Number one, Freetown the Tree Town. That's our plan to plant 1 million trees. And it's not just a plan, it's happening. We're now at 550,000 in the ground and 60,000 along the mangroves. And the thing about Freetown the Tree Town, thank you. Let's take that moment. Thank you. The thing about Freetown the Tree Town is it's not planting trees alone. It's specifically about growing them. That means every tree has a unique identifier. Every tree is uploaded into a tree tracker app, which is on a customized app that we had built. And we have 600 young people who act as tree growers. Any Freetonian, anybody in our city can be a tree steward. You can plant trees, but we have specific growers that watch over them. So and we have an impact investing model. It's expensive, it needs money, so that's another challenge when we come to challenges. But so planting the trees, the 1 million trees. Introducing a cable car system. which will introduce for the first time ever mass transit, but it'll be green. We'll be moving 6,000 people in an hour, cutting down travel time from 2.5 hours to 20 minutes from the east to the west of the city. But significantly, from the perspective of extreme heat, taking off those guzzlers from the roads. And finally, on sanitation, ensuring that we're building a system which allows us to, enables us to have an end-to-end on the value chain. Recycling, plastics, using organic waste. We have one biodigester which is currently providing electricity for a women's health center, the Aberdeen Women's Center, but we are going to have 2 more of those by the end of the year, and hopefully by the end of next year, 40 more. So converting our waste into energy and enabling some of that waste which would otherwise be going to the landfill, to the dump site, to be safely converted. I think I'm going to stop here and just say, by way of the challenges, money, money, money. Somebody said in the meeting I was at just now that this is going to be a revolution. Well, every revolution needs to be funded. So we need the funding for the revolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Kathy and I had the pleasure to visit you last week in Freetown for the launch of the African City Champion for Heat Action initiative and the appointment of the first ever African Chief Heat Officer. So we're really happy for that, and we are, very pleased to have you as our champion mayor in the African continent, just like we are very happy to have Mayor Bakoyannis as our champion mayor in Europe. We were in Athens in July to launch the European Cities Champion for Heat Action initiative and the appointment of the first ever European Chief Heat Officer, our good friend Leone being here with us today. And we know you are undertaking several initiatives regarding extreme heat. Now, Athens suffered successive heat waves this past summer with temperatures reaching 45 degrees Celsius. There were also around 100 wildfires, including a major fire near Athens that caught the main road linking the north and south and forced hundreds of people to evacuate. Athens is one of the most densely populated cities in Europe, and the city is dealing with an urban heat island phenomenon that can reach up to 10 degrees Celsius difference between the center of Athens and its suburbs. What measures are currently being planned to address extreme heat in Athens? Mayor Bakoyannis, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, and many, many thanks for the invitation. And of course, thanks to the Arsht-Rock Foundation and the Atlantic Council for their leadership. We are extremely grateful for all the support you generously offer all our cities. So, kudos and many, many thanks. Now, I was listening to you describe Athens, and it got a bit scary there for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, things are clearly not that bad. Why am I saying this? Athens is the only city in the world that has been continuously inhabited for thousands and thousands of years. So believe me when I tell you that Athens is a definition of a resilient city. Now, why is Athens a definition of the resilient city? Not because I'm its mayor, and I'm proud of my city, but because Athens constantly evolves. It's a dynamic city, a city that's been reborn. So yes, we are proud of the Acropolis, but we're equally proud of our modern self. And this is essentially what we're doing right now, if you think about it. Yes, heat, extreme heat, is a huge issue. It's a silent killer. 200 people lose their lives every year in Greece alone. 2020 was the hottest year on record in Europe, And I'm sorry to say that 2021 will probably break this record. And of course, we had the mega fires you mentioned over the summer, which, however, did not happen in a vacuum. There is a direct relationship between cause and effect. Cause being prolonged and early heat waves, the effect being the fires. We have to be very, very clear. So what we did was institute this new innovative position of Chief Heat Officer. And I'm extremely grateful to my friend, Leone. She hates it when I single her out, which makes it much more fun. To my friend, Leone, who, for all of us who know her, is a natural phenomenon for taking up this task. Number one, it's about raising awareness. Try talking about the heat to Greeks. It's like talking to fish about the water. Believe me, it's not easy. So what we're doing, and I was glad to hear that the Mayor of Seville is working in parallel, is actually naming and categorizing heat waves. We think it's extremely important. And it's extremely important not just because we want to communicate our message, but because if there is something the pandemic has taught us is that we need to learn to speak the language of public health. So we are protecting our people, and protection is key. Number two, it's about the paradigm shift. Now, this is not only true of heat. It's true in general when we're talking about the climate crisis or climate change or climate catastrophe, to be more exact. Anything and everything we do in the city of Athens, let me repeat that. Anything and everything we do in the city of Athens, every decision we make, small or big, has climate change at its heart. Now, it could well be something that may sound rather literally pedestrian, like what material should we use on a sidewalk because we actually want to cool our public space. It could be something in a neighborhood, a pocket park. A pocket park may not change a city, but it may well change a neighborhood. Or it could be something much bigger and grander, like investing in our urban lungs, or moving forward, which is what we're doing now, with major urban revival projects. In any case, whatever it is, there is a new working hypothesis. Number one, A, the letter in the alphabet, we begin with climate change. The next thing, which for us is very important, is we want this to be a comprehensive plan. We want to have a strategy. Not a tragedy for, it would be a tragedy if it was a strategy for 270 or 2080. Mike Bloomberg said earlier something which made a lot of sense. He said, when you plan for something that's not going to happen in our lifetimes, you're either being a fool or you're trying to fool others. But a plan for 2030. A real plan with real solutions to real problems. We have set clear goals. We want to take down emissions by 61%. We believe we can do it. And we're mobilizing all powers within the city towards a common goal. And here is where two things are key. Number one, mobilizing our business community, engaging our business community, for example, through offering subsidies for them to be able to upgrade their buildings, to actually achieve energy upgrades. At the same time, pay special attention to the least vulnerable, to the most vulnerable, to those communities that suffer the most. Because make no mistake, there are inequalities. there are socioeconomic inequalities, there are intergenerational inequalities, and there are gender inequalities. And the third thing, which is quite important for us, is that our policy, our strategy, must be data-driven. We have great faith, I'm sure, as mayors, in our intuition, right? I mean, you know, we are mayors after all. But having said that, this is bad public policy planning. So, for example, when it comes to heat, we have mapped out the heat pressures in our city. And we have a solar map. So we know exactly where we want to focus. It's not empirical, you know, somebody said to someone who said to someone else. It is very, very real. And at the same time, we make sure to actually use data to estimate the impact of the change we deliver. So, for example, you have a new big water fountain. How many degrees did the temperature fall in the square? In case you're interested, 3 degrees. Or another example, you are moving forward with pedestrianization of a big avenue. What does this mean for CO2 emissions? In case you're interested, 27% down. Now, all this may sound a bit too small for a COP, right? I mean, it's probably a bit too small for the Financial Times or for the New York Times because it's on a neighborhood level. But here is my final pitch. Climate change is about working bottom up. It's about the quality of life of everyone. It's about winning daily small battles, about small victories. And all these small victories sum up and they become something big. And you know what? If you start winning, even if you start winning small, you build trust. And trust is big. So many, many thanks for everything.
Thank you so much, Mayor Bakoyannis. And in spite of Athens being a bit hot during the summer, we'll still love it, and we'll keep doing so, and we'll like to visit it every year. It is a beautiful city. Thank you so much for that, and for your efforts on having the climate agenda as a top of your priorities. Mayor Levine Cava, you were the first city champion for heat action, Mayor, and we are really grateful for that. You have mentioned that in Miami-Dade County, the number of days with a heat index above 105 degrees is forecast to rise from 7 days per year up to 88 days annually by 2050. To address this reality, you have undertaken several actions, from partnering with the media and NGOs for conducting awareness campaigns to incorporating cool pavements. Can you please elaborate on the type of actions you are implementing to safeguard your population from heat health-related risks?
Well, thank you so very much for including me on this panel with these wonderful mayors that are now my best friends, because we form a very special group of the early adopters of this anti-heat strategy. And I can just imagine listening to what's happening in Athens, that next time I book my Airbnb, they'll be telling you what's the temperature, average temperature in that location. And block by block, people will opt for those areas that are cooler, have more shade, have more fountains. So that was a very interesting concept. And both of you have outlined some very innovative and bold things you're doing. And we too in Miami-Dade are moving ahead with heat, our newest innovation, but we're always at the cutting edge because we're always most at risk, and we do actually have the most assets at risk of any place on the planet. And when they started talking about sea level rise and climate change, Miami-Dade was the focus. So we've clearly, we're often the canary in the coal mine when it comes to these challenges. So we embrace that, and we're so very proud to be part of the Arsht-Rockefeller Foundation initiative. And a special thanks to Adrian Arsht, who actually has a home in Miami-Dade and has been a great patroness of arts and ethics and civic life in our community, has done so very, very much for us, and now is leading the way on this important conversation. So just to put it in context, I don't know how many of you have been to Miami-Dade, a very popular place these days, very open during the pandemic, and a lot of people moving there for lifestyle issues. We are a community of almost 3 million in Miami-Dade County, and about 300,000 who work regularly outdoors. So these heat days that were mentioned, by the way, in Fahrenheit, not Celsius, not to scare you too much. I don't know why we're still on Fahrenheit, but nonetheless, Fahrenheit we are. Yeah, it was a little scary, right? 100 plus, yeah, just in case you were wondering. Okay. But we all know, and we were so proud to recognize heat as the silent killer, as you say, and causing more deaths than all these other natural disasters. And so April 30th, we became the first in the world to have a chief heat officer, thanks to the wonderful support. Thank you. Thank you. And Jane Gilbert, unfortunately not with us physically, has been a champion on climate change issues for many, many years. She was the author of the 100 Resilient City application that was the first in the world to have 2 cities and a county and a collaborative approach. And I think I'll just start with that, talking a little bit about collaboration. I consider myself collaborator-in-chief. I think that's how I got to be mayor about a year ago. And clearly, this challenge requires collaboration because all over the world we have multiple levels of jurisdictions, not always working in concert, different agendas. Very shocking to hear that you can't control your own land use issues. I really feel for you, definitely. Not a good thing. If you don't have that control, and of course we have a legislature in the state that preempts the things we try to do locally, and we have a federal government that is coming around. We're very happy for the leadership of President Biden and the commitments that are being made. But in some countries, having resilience plans is mandatory, not so in our country. So we are proud to have rolled out last week our climate change strategy. It's very comprehensive. It focuses on buildings and on transportation, on jobs. So every aspect of moving forward a more climate, who said everything through the lens of climate change, like a climate change impact statement. I think that's very good. I think we should take that back home and put that into practice. Very, very good idea. But these things are being done at the local level. So it is bottom up. The locals are driving this conversation, so much so. But we must have national leadership and commitments. And of course, that's what COP26 is about. The local, multi-level, multi-layer, that's what it's all about. So focusing on heat, you might know that we're famous for hurricanes. Of course, hurricanes have extended all over not only the eastern seaboard of the United States, but now there was even a hurricane on the West Coast. Go figure. We were spared any hurricanes in Miami-Dade County this past year. That's because I'm a new mayor and they wanted to take it easy on me after the Surfside building collapse. So I'm very, very grateful. Thank you, God. No hurricanes yet, but just always have to knock on wood just in case. But that doesn't mean they're not coming, and they're not coming faster, bigger, longer, more water. And so we are very much aware of dealing with climate disaster, but heat is the one that has not been recognized. So looking forward to bringing our heat leadership to the national stage, as well as now to the global stage, and see if we can't support our sister cities, counties, and states to move forward with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Levine Cava. And you were mentioning something regarding the importance of having a naming and ranking system for hurricanes.
Yes.
And that has proved to be a very effective mechanism to raise awareness in the US
Yes.
ever since the 50s. So
Yes.
I would like to ask this question to Mayor Bakoyannis, because we know you are developing a categorization system for heat waves in your city along with the meteorology agency of Athens. So could you please comment to us about that? I think that's just like the mayor of Seville mentioned, that's a very avant-garde initiative, and I think it's great that you as a city champion for heat action mayor are undertaking this kind of actions.
You know, there isn't any politician on the face of the planet who doesn't like to hear that what he or she is doing is avant-garde. But in reality, we are late. In reality, we should have done this decades ago. We have a methodology that works. We use it for hurricanes, we use it for storms, and we know that it works because it saves lives. We are now moving forward in Greece, applying the same model to heat waves. Again, with the same logic, that we want to save lives. It's going to begin next summer. I am very optimistic. I think that the Greeks will adopt the system, will make the necessary mental shift very, very quickly. And I hope that the rest of Europe, and the rest of the world for that matter, will follow swiftly.
Thank you so much for that, and congratulations for that initiative, Mayor Bakoyannis. I think that mayors are the closest political authorities to people, and they know their everyday concerns and problems. So that's why a priority for mayors should be saving people's lives, protecting people's lives, and that's what all of you are doing, so congratulations for that. Yvonne, I would like to ask you to please comment to us details about the ways in which you are motivating people to be part of the Freetown, the Tree Town initiative. We learned with Kathy last week about very interesting mechanisms by which you are engaging the community to be part of this great endeavor. Could you please talk to us about that?
Thanks. Thank you. And just to say, it was a real pleasure to have Kathy and Mauricio in Freetown, and for them to actually get a little bit more of an understanding of the context that we're dealing with and the differences. Cities are so different in different parts of the world, but climate change is affecting us all, and we need to have our contextualized solutions, contextualized responses. So in terms of getting ownership, you mentioned how you talk to a Greek about extreme heat or heat in general. In many instances, how do you talk to people about climate when there's so many more immediate existential threats in their view? You know, low life expectancy, challenges with, accommodation, we mentioned, jobs and so forth, very high unemployment. But it's really critical that we do bring communities along, because there's nothing that's going to happen on a significant scale without there being ownership. Government cannot do things to people. They have to do things with people. And so what we've sought to do is to, in the first instance, really talk not so much about climate change and extreme heat and air quality, things which feel maybe a little bit, intangible and removed, but rather to talk about, don't worry about it. Okay, thank you, Brother Mayor. But rather to talk about what impacts people have on their day-to-day. And the easiest one to pin all of this on is flooding, landslides, water shortages. These are realities. Linking it back then to trees. So I have two experiences I want to share with you about working with communities on this and getting community buy-in. One example is an example on a hillside community, an informal settlement, having a discussion because we were doing, our trees are planted all over the city, and 82% of cooking fuel is wood-based. Can you see the risk? So as you're planting, there's a big chance that that's being taken away. So there's a real need to get that ownership, to get that sense of this matters to me and it needs to be protected. And very simple, very, very simple thing that you could do in a school is to have a conversation and say, okay, tree cover leads to water. Take a saucer of water, put one under a tree, put one out just in the open. Let's see which one of these is going to dry up. That is what is happening to your water source. That is why you have no water in the dry season. That is why your young children are having to wake up at 3 in the morning to go walk long distances to fetch water. We can change that by planting the trees. And then on the mangroves, which is another critical, so that's hillside, mangroves, destruction of mangroves being driven by this desire for housing. It's incredibly sad, and again comes back to this lack of development control. The use of waste material stacked along the coast to create land. How it's not exactly how Holland was built, but the same concept. Land reclamation, but in this case using waste. But it kills the mangrove. And with killing the mangrove, you're also losing your fish population, which increases poverty and increases lack of access to protein. So a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago now, in a conversation with the tree planting team, and they're giving me their readout of what they're going to be doing, which includes planting these 60,000 trees along the Aberdeen Creek, where 6 informal communities reside. And I said to them, have you spoken to the communities? Oh, yeah, Mayor, we did a presentation. I was like, you did a presentation? Okay, and what did they say? Because you are going to go and plant those trees and they are going to be gone in 2 weeks' time because no one is going to own this. And I suggested that we actually go and invest some time. We spend 4 hours with the community, really getting under the skin of what the issue was. And we changed the structure. They had actually had people from within the community as community growers. But what I wanted to be sure we did was to identify the people who are doing the banking, the ones who are being paid to build these housing, and get them to be part of our teams. So we did that successfully. We changed the composition. We also ensured that we got the community to pick the seedlings themselves. So it doesn't sound like a lot of money to you, but we effectively gave the community access to $12,000 by them just literally finding the whitelings, the seedlings of the mangroves, and we paid for each one, $2 for each one. That brings buy-in, that brings a sense of ownership. And then you identify among them, okay, now you are the growers and we are paying you. So I guess to answer your question, that's just 2 examples of how we're really internalizing, really drawing communities into this. And of course, Facebook and WhatsApp are a great tool. So anybody who's ever been a tree steward, if they post something on Facebook and they tag me, I'm amplifying that all over. See how their trees are growing. So I guess we've created a buzz. Freetown, the Tree Town, is a brand, and the Freetonians own it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yvonne, and congratulations for that great effort. Kathy and I witnessed the powerful impact that this initiative is having in your city, so that's really great. Daniella, we know you have a great announcement to make today. So please let us know about that. We are really excited about this great news. So please go ahead regarding commenting on this very, very important initiative that your city will undertake, not only for local purposes, but for the U.S. and the world as a whole. Please.
Well, thank you so much for that. And again, I'm so grateful to be in this space and have this support to make this possible. So, starting in 2022, when you're naming your heat waves, we are declaring a heat season, the first ever heat season. Thank you. Which will stretch from May 1st until October 31st. And this will be the season in which we will be on alert, just as we are for hurricanes. Our shelters will be ready to go. If needed, we will create shelter space for those who cannot safely stay in their homes because of a heat wave. And we will do this with the support of our Chief Heat Officer, but also the Heat Task Force, which is focusing on vulnerable populations, those who are least likely to be able to afford to live in places that will stay naturally cool. I mean, we're not cutting down the trees for firewood, but we are having so many people that are living in substandard conditions, cannot pay utility bills, do not have working air conditions, or they work in the field and they need to have respite. So many reasons why we need to declare this a critical time of watch. And our next will be naming those heat waves. So stay tuned. But I'm very, very proud of the work that has just begun in these few months. We already have a toolkit on how people can protect themselves from extreme heat. And you can find it at our website, miamidade.gov/heat. We are already launching our public awareness, public education campaign, how people can take safety measures. And I take a lot of inspiration from your example, how we can engage the public and making it something that they own, that they have a stake in. So this is going to be, by the way, every year. So going forward, and I'm going to be encouraging all the mayors around the United States and elsewhere to take advantage of this approach. And this is something that I can do within my authority as the strong mayor of Miami-Dade County. And we have, as I say, the resources. We have an Office of Emergency Management that is very experienced in handling disasters. In fact, at the current time, I think we have 2 disasters that I've declared emergencies for that are being managed. And we were up to 3 and almost 4 when the hurricane was heading. So this is how we roll. And we do have very extensive disaster planning tools, and now heat will be a key part. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I think that this is a clear demonstration about how mayors are changing the world. They are doing so by taking innovative and disruptive, bold decisions to address some of the world's most pressing issues, like extreme heat. Now I would like to take questions from the floor, please. Excuse me, just a second. Thanks.
So I'm Xavier Cortada. I'm from the University of Miami. And from Miami, you are my beloved and favorite mayor because you have been walking that walk long before you were elected. So thank you, Mayor. And thank you for doing what you're doing for heat. I was in Sierra Leone in 1994. Back then, as you know, civil wars, Rwanda, there was a genocide, there were lots of political migrants. Now we're looking at climate migrants, not across Africa, but even clearly within. Many who find their way to your shores across the Mediterranean. And obviously that's the reason why this is a global crisis. But I want to ask you what may be a provocative question. I remember those corrugated metal homes. I was there with the U.S. Embassy doing work back in the day. And it was hot, right? As your economic plans aim to bring more wealth to your citizens, they're going to want air conditioning. And air conditioning is going to create more greenhouse gases that will exacerbate the crisis. They deserve air conditioning just as much as I do. What can we do at the global level to persuade developing countries that have air conditioning and take it for granted to maybe sacrifice a little so that everyone across our globe, as we're facing these catastrophes, can have a more equitable living reality? As an African mayor, what do you tell the world in this global conference about equity?
All right, so the question of equity is a very big one. And let me just start by saying that in respect of the corrugated iron, it's not, our vision is for that not to be seen as an accepted way to construct homes. So we are in the process of working with 5 of our communities to do neighborhood upgrades. And a key feature of that is changing the structure of the housing. But we're talking about 35 to 40% of our residents living in informal settlements. Doesn't mean they're necessarily living in corrugated iron homes, but that level of informality, that level of poverty is very high. Your question is, where does the balance go? Because the big emitters are the ones who have the air conditioners, maybe not everybody, but to a large extent, they're the ones living in comfort. And I think what you're saying is, as the middle class grows, as economies expand, what are the choices that we're expecting to be made by those in the global south? Why should they not have the air conditioners when others do? That's a very simple way that I've used to repeat what you've said or to try and reframe your question. But that question of equity is really important. I would take it back one step and I would say, why is it that at the moment, the consequences from the droughts to the landslides, to the mudslides, to the flooding, which are being experienced in the global south, which are caused by emissions of the global north, why are the global south being expected to pay for that? So the inequality begins there. But before I answer your question completely, let me just give you an example of another very famous rhetoric about equality that we were listening to about 12 months ago, COVID vaccines. Oh, we're going to have equality with COVID vaccines. We're going to ensure that there's going to be no inequality with this. Everyone is going to have access. No one will be left behind according to the SDGs. Well, guess what? People are on third jabs, on boosters. Less than 5% of Africa has had the first one. So we know that there's inequality. And I think the way I like to frame this particular one with climate is that if you think you are leaving anyone behind, think again. Because climate is fueling significant migration, internal for now, but if this situation continues, if we continue to see the desertification, if there are estimates that say 70% of our continent is going to be uninhabitable. I can't remember exactly what date, so I'm going to be cautious and not say, but there is a projected date. And that's crazy because that's billions of people, So we really do need to think about this. And I wouldn't come at it from air conditioner or air conditioner. I'd come at it from policy. I'd come at it from the seriousness within which the rhetoric becomes reality in respect of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, in respect of removing carbon from the environment, which is where the tree planting and other methods of sequestration come in. And I'd say that that's where the emphasis has to be. There are 10 countries that account for 70% of emissions. Let's not talk about my air conditioner versus yours. Let's talk about bringing that greenhouse gas emission level down. And at the same time, talking about making finance, not in theory, Not in theory. I sat next to someone at a dinner last night, and they said the 10 billion, 100 billion for Global South, which was pledged 10 years ago. I said, that money was never real, was it? And he said, nah, it was never real. It was a conversation that somebody had, and there was nothing behind it. And 10 years down the line, yeah, it was definitely never real, because we've seen less than 100 billion in that 10 years, and 75% of that has been concessional loans. So let's actually now stop playing about this and really see money come behind this, money that gets to people, which means coming to the local authorities, not necessarily staying at the nation states, and let's see accountability. I was also saying to someone yesterday, a nation state, you know, we have this distinction, we're the mayors, they're the nation states. I was saying to a government official that, you know, these nationally determined contributions, they're so nice, aren't they? Nobody holds you to account. You make them, you come, you do an you don't do an like, you know, there may be some conversations, some speeches, but at the end of the day, nothing is tangibly holding you to account. Maybe that's what we need to change. So, air conditioner, policies. Let's reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and let's also make sure we're not bringing in policies such as telling countries in the Global South that they cannot invest in gas. If there is no power, there will be no growth. Renewable power is very important, and I highly recommend it to you, but we actually need not fossil fuel as in the real heavy stuff, coal and oil, but at this point, we need to be able to use gas because we don't have reliable sources of power. So an appreciation that one size does not fit all, that in order for us all to get there, the inequalities cannot be increased. And that means that we're going to do this transition at different paces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Here? Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. My name is Arvind. I'm from India. And yesterday we had very big claims and pledges from the Indian side. And it's a comment, and I would want your response on it. So with bigger commitments and action plans that we have set for ourselves, there's a trend that not cities not being nation states, but cities or mayoral power actually diminishing as things kind of go on. Because the targets and aims that we have set for ourselves are pushing ourselves for bigger scale and speed of implementation of different programs and different schemes across cities, in India especially. And what you're seeing is that the mayoral control over city land use, over what they can do, is gradually decreasing. So I would want your sort of opinion on what is there in other regions, and what are your thoughts on, as we try to achieve these targets that we set for ourselves, how do you think this is going to pan out, and what would be left in your hands to deal with this crisis? Thank you.
So we do have responsibility for land use and zoning in my county of 3 million people, but within the county there are 34 cities, and those cities incorporated so they could control the land use. Makes it very complicated to get collaboration, and we have these cities, they signed on to our climate strategy, and we need to talk to them and say, this means that you have to make these decisions in a certain way. You have to be accountable for what you signed. We've also been preempted by our state government, which is more conservative and not really with the program, for all kinds of things that we would like to do, and we're not allowed to do it. They've taken that authority away from us, including our local elected officials at the state level who've been complicit. And what is that about? That's about the drive for development. It's about profit, short term. Last night, I had a dinner conversation with a gentleman who's does analysis and economic forecasting for cities based on all the risks we're talking about here. And he told me that a number of large real estate holding companies or investors of various sorts have engaged him to find out, should they be still investing in my community? And of course they are, as they should. And what does he tell them? And what is it that we can do that could, forestall and make us still desirable, at least preserve the value of people's assets for as long as possible, but also be realistic. And earlier today, another member of ICLEI, which is the small governmental, which I'm part of, the small cities and counties working together across 25 nations, we heard from one of our members who spoke about Hawaii and where they are actually openly, deliberately curtailing development. Now, how many of us can actually say that?
Thank you so much, Daniela. We have a question here.
Daniel Stander, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Mayor Maurizio, Mayor Yvonne, Mayor Costas, Mayor Daniela, thank you very much for a very engaging conversation. Thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for Kathy and her team for leading what we're leading around heat. It's very, very important. I had a question that just moves the conversation on ever so slightly. I wondered to what extent you as mayors had thought about finance, not in the sense of reducing the emissions, not in the sense of paying for the adaptation, but in the sense of transfer, meaning using the balance sheets of others, of the private sector, as a hedge. So thinking about the most common form of that would be insurance. I think heat historically has not been an insurable peril, but there's nothing about heat which means it cannot be insured. This is a very emerging area, and I wondered whether that was on your radar or not. And if it's not, that's not a problem, but maybe it could be something that is the beginning of a conversation. Thank you.
Well, Costas? Costas, please.
Well, that's a really interesting question, and you're absolutely right. It does take the discussion to the next level. At least as far as we are concerned in Athens, we are extremely open to this discussion. Now, of course, the devil is in the details, which I'm sure you will appreciate, because we're talking about a highly complex financial instrument. So it's not just a yes or no answer. But in any case, what I would like to, what I would actually like to note is that the very fact that we are having this conversation shows how much progress we have made, which is extremely important. And this is a progress where, to follow up also on the previous exchange you had with our friend from India, where it's very important that cities actually play a catalytic role. There is a larger truth here. The larger truth here is that, as you said earlier, the COP is in danger, in risk. I hope that's not going to be the case, but it's in risk of becoming another Davos. So basically, we all get together, we talk, we exchange business cards, we make well-intentioned statements, and then we go home. The challenge, however, is how we can move from theory to practice. And that's a challenge for all of us. Now, cities have a natural competitive advantage, which is highly political. We are the closest level of democratic governance to the citizens, right? Citizens, citizens, from the ancient Greek polis where democracy was born. So by definition, we cannot afford to hide from the problem. A heat wave, a mudslide, or a storm, that has a direct, real impact on our people and on us. So the more responsibility, I think, passes to cities, including, I'd say, the design of such novel financial instruments, the better served our people would be.
Thank you so much, Costas. Sophie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for a really energising event from all of you. It's really wonderful to hear both the challenges, but how you're all working collectively to overcome them. And that's quite refreshing in a conversation of conversations, day 2. I had a bit of a curveball question, and I don't know if you're sorry if I've put you all on the spot, but we know that climate change disproportionately affects women, and that's particularly true in urban environments. And I just wondered what either you're doing or planning to do, or how we can all collectively help you to address some of the gender concerns, especially around heat, knowing that it really does impact women in ways that we know about, but we aren't always able to support. So just any reflections on how you see kind of gender and heat and the other risks you're facing within your cities would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, climate change, not just heat, but climate change generally. I think crises generally disproportionately affect women because of the roles that they tend to play and because of the vulnerabilities that they have already, disadvantages built into the system. So as you would have heard, we have just appointed our Chief Heat Officer. And part of what we're doing, I step back a minute. All of what I've said before has all had gender in the makeup of it, because everything I've described sits within the context of a broader plan. You heard hashtag Transform Freetown, but hashtag Freetown the Tree Town, but it sits within hashtag Transform Freetown, which is our 3-year, now 4-year plan of integrated development of the city that I launched when I came in and became mayor in 2018. So that has 4 clusters, 11 priority sectors, and we have women and girls as a lens. If you look at the diagram of Transform Freetown, it actually says women and girls. So we actually have that gender lens through everything. But in terms of the specifics of heat, we've talked a lot, my colleagues have spoken about data, and that's where we're going now. Being able to use the service, the skills and the competence and the work that Eugenia will be doing, supported by the Arsht-Rock Foundation, for us to drill down. So I said earlier, we haven't got the data. We're doing this work ahead of the data. And now what we're going to do is be able to pull this out and be more responsive. But I couldn't agree with you more. There is a need to really look carefully, but the data is going to drive whatever it is we do to make the tweaks and adjustments to our broader plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. We have heard today from Freetown, the tree town, to categorizing heat waves in Athens, to having the first ever heat season system being established in Miami-Dade County. This is innovation. These are really disruptive actions being taken by mayors to undertake the threat that kills more people regarding climate, extreme heat. Congratulations, mayors. It is really great to see what you are doing, and you're inspiring mayors all over the world. This is all about what City Champions for Heat Action is aiming to do. So thank you so much for that. And now I would like to hand it to Kathy.
Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation, first ever. We have made some exciting announcements, yes, but let it be the first of many. Mayor Bakoyannis said, we're in the conversation. We're having the conversation. The Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance is built to help you solve those problems. We have public awareness solutions. We have public policy solutions and toolkits. We have finance and risk tools. We have new members, and we'll be making an exciting announcement this week with a new partner about using climate risk analytics to better inform the decisions and the investments that we make. We are sophisticated. We are in the conversation. You are leading it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing. We're just getting started. Thank you all very much, and have a great rest of the COP. Stay positive. This is climate action right here. Extreme leadership for extreme heat. Thank you very much.